Hello, everybody, and welcome to KFC SuperCoach AFL for 2023. The game is open as of about midnight and 1 second this morning. I did see on Twitter there were some extremely keen KFC SuperCoaches out there who were trying to be in the first 100 or 10 people to sign in as soon as the game opened. But it is there now for everybody. You can log in and
Tim Mitchell
check
was
out
one
the
of
site.
them.
There's a bunch of new. He might well have been, yes. A bunch of new stuff on there to check out and play around with. Obviously, we've got a few weeks before round one, but plenty to get into. And we'll go through some of those changes, what's new, and who we're looking to pick in our 2023 teams over the next half hour or so. Joined here with a couple of KFC SuperCoach experts, legends, and very good friends. Great to be back for another season of AFL SuperCoach. The Phantom has joined us from the Lair in South Australia. How soon were you on the site this morning, Phantom, picking Tom Green and all the players we know that you love?
Oh my God, our Peyton! I cannot believe we have again for 2023. I actually picked my team yesterday. You know, I have special access to KFC SuperCoach, so I've been on there for a while. I was up late again with Tim Mitchell last night. Couldn't wait. A lot of excitement around in the KFC SuperCoach community. Good to see a lot of people jumping on early and picking their teams. I'm ready to get stuck into it. I'm sure we'll talk about a few of the players we picked first on the show.
Yeah, absolutely. And Dan Batten, of course, joining us as well. Already, both of you guys have been looking into the rookies, so we'll get into that chat at some stage today too. But knowing who the cheapies are to stick in our teams obviously is a key to how we piece the puzzle together. So, Dan, we're really looking forward to you telling us who all the rookies are we need to put in this year.
No pressure, Al. I think a lot of the ones I spruiked last year didn't go so well. So hopefully it goes a bit better this year. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how we do lay out our teams. I think in particular, defence and midfield will be interesting. With the rookies, there's a few rookies up forward that are looking pretty tantalising at this stage. Some low price options that in past years have been pretty solid scorers. So in that regard, we're good up forward, but in the midfield and defence, it's looking a little bit trickier at this stage.
Dan, that's a sharp trim there for SuperCoach opening day. I like
it. Oh, thank you, Al. No, not Al, Phantom, but something that isn't so sharp. Your SuperCoach BBL form over the past few months. No wonder you're keen to get onto AFL. The way you've been tracking, I've been looking at the rankings, having to scroll down, eventually find your name. What's been going on?
This is SuperCoach AFL only chat on this one. So if you want to chat me up with BBL, then we can wait till the next podcast there. But no, I have fallen down a little bit. It's been fun. Ready for the real stuff now. But how's the BBL, man?
Wow.
Yeah, I think my ranking dropped a little bit after the last round, but I'm around the sort of 300 mark overall. So, if I could replicate that in AFL this year, I'd be absolutely stoked. But I had a pretty good start to the final round with some of my Hurricanes last night. So, hopefully I can push back up a little bit for the end of KFC SuperCoach BBL, which has been really good fun. But as you say, this is the game we're really all about. So, Anthony's, thanks, guys. A couple of comments already. So, if you've got a question, chuck it in the comments and we'll try and get to some of those as well. But quickly to have a look at some of the changes to the game this year. Or I suppose, first of all, maybe worth mentioning that some of the big changes that we had last year, which generally I think got very positive reception, especially the trade boosts, are all back for this year. So, that added another fun element to the game in terms of strategy and how to use those extra trades. And so last year, total trades went up to 35, and this year we'll have 36. And that is to account for the fact that there's an extra round in the fixture this year. So thanks to we'll all be jetting over to South Australia to join the Phantom for Gather Round when that comes around. So there's now, I think, 20. Every team will play 23 games over 24 rounds in the 2023 AFL season. So, one more trade to help us through there, 36 for the year. And another question that a lot of people have been asking is the AFL fixture this year also includes 4 bye rounds. So usually we have 3, but this year there's 4. And in one of those rounds, there's only the 2 teams on the bye, Geelong and Gold Coast, and we might get into that. I'm sure we will over the preseason, how that might affect who we pick in our teams. But the best 18 scoring, which has traditionally applied to bye rounds, will cover all 4 of those byes. So might have been a bit tricky to go from best 18 back to best 22, back to best 18. And so for simplicity's sake, as much as anything, we're just going to go best 18 through those entire 4 rounds. So that will probably add a little bit of extra strategy around, especially that round 13, I think it is, bye with just the Cats and Gold Coast, whether we, you can potentially start maybe more of those guys in your team to start with, knowing that you should be pretty well covered in that bye round. But we'll get into all that stuff. But they're probably the main things that I think people will be keen to know in terms of big changes for the year. But there's lots of other little things around the site. People will have noticed when they logged in that it has a nice fresh look, new menus, just trying to make everything easier to find and just quicker to navigate. Even, being able to create or join a league straight from the homepage, things like that. So, we're definitely keen to hear people's feedback and what they think. But I think it definitely should make the whole experience just more fun and just easier, and everything makes more sense where you want to find it. So I really like that, and I'll be checking all those little features out myself as we go over the next few weeks, I guess. But I suppose probably should mention leagues to go with the fixture changes. The default 18-team leagues are going up to 20 teams this year, and they'll start in round 2 league matches, which have previously been round 3. And 10-team leagues will start 1 round later in round 3. But everyone can still, as big changes came in last year, where you can customise a league any size you want. So if you still want to stick to an 18-team league, or maybe you've got 14 or 12 people who want to play together, you can create those leagues and set your own starting round. So that's all still available. But if you go with the default, it'll be a 20-team league. Everyone will have their finals in rounds 21 to 24. There's also a bunch of changes in SuperCoach Plus and in KFC SuperCoach Draft, especially around keeper leagues. Phantom, you're a bit of a draft expert. I don't know if you want to quickly touch on those, but again, just more tools to be able to play the game you want to be able to, how you want to play it.
Yeah, absolutely. We know SuperCoach Draft players love the keeper leagues. They'll roll over automatically each season now. You might have seen it when logging in. There's no longer any need to reactivate those leagues and re-invite everyone again. So it just goes back into what I was saying about making everything a little bit easier and condensing the time you're navigating the site, and rather than just playing it. So also a lot more customization and what commissioners can do with the league. They can edit the draft order for any round. They can also change the player retention settings. You can control the scoring in your specific draft league over the bye rounds, how many players you want to count, and also filter the waiver wire in more ways. Pause a live draft as well, which is very important. We've had a couple of issues in our own league. I think Al and Dan over the past couple of years would have liked to pause the draft button. So there'll be no such issues in 2023. Just a couple of little extra things, making SuperCoach Draft a bit easier and a bit more fun to play.
And another little nugget in SuperCoach Plus, which people might have noticed in KFC SuperCoach BBL, but will feature now in AFL as well, is that in the Coach's Choice feature, which I really like, where you can see how many teams every player is picked in. You can now filter that by the top 1%, 5%, and 10% of teams. So obviously, once the season gets going, that could be really handy to know that if there's one player that everyone in the top 1% is on, it's a pretty good heads up as to someone who you might want to pick in your own team.
Just for batting, can you look at top 20%? Can you look at that?
What about you for SuperCoach BBL, top 50%? We might be able to find you there. But
you enjoy your BBL hike. Is about the highest you'll get this year, I think.
Of course, that's just some of the new features and changes for the year. So, we'll be talking about those as we go on. But really what we want to know is who do we need to pick in our teams? My team is actually live on heraldsuns.com.au and the Advertiser and Code Sports now. So go and check that out. But I suppose the first question we need to ask our experts is, Phantom, we'll start with you. Who was the first player you picked in your SuperCoach team when the game opens?
Well, it's going to be a bit boring for me. Everyone knows I'm going to pick Tom Green. I've got him at M3, maybe push him to M4 at the moment, 534K. We know Jacob Hoffer and Tim Taranto have left that midfield. Also, Tanner Bruin as well gone to the catch from the Giants. So there is more responsibility. Someone needs to step up a little bit. And we've seen him, we averaged 110, I think, for the first 9 or 10 rounds last season. Started off the blaze of glory in that opening month before falling away. His consistency, the key for him, he needs to find consistency as well. He needs to get around the ground and last a little bit longer through the season. So hopefully he gets the stability position-wise in that midfield. New coach, not as many guys go through there anymore left of the Giants. So 534K, I've been saying for 3 or 4 years, by now, but I think this could be finally the year.
Well, you have to pick him, don't you? Because if you don't, and it is the year that he breaks out, you just about have to give up on the whole game. I think if you missed out on that when he finally does become an absolute KFC SuperCoach beast, which looks like will happen. It's just a matter of when. And that price point is really interesting because when you look at the top 6 or 8 midfielders, just in terms of price and based on their average last year, you kind of think you need somehow we need all those guys. By the end of the season, they can't really see any of them dropping off. But then that next tier down, where you've got a Tom Green, you've got Luke Davies-Uniacke, someone like Noah Anderson or Chad Warner, or even Tom Mitchell's a lot cheaper this year. You could see all of those guys potentially jumping up and scoring 110 plus and becoming top 8 midfielders. So it's a matter of getting the right ones, I guess. But it's very rare that the top bracket just stays the same from year to year. There's bound to be 1 or 2 who come in. I'm not quite sure who's going to go the other way, but if you can pick the right one, as we saw last year, it can be a huge advantage early in the season.
Just on that price bracket, I've got a few other players in that price range scattered throughout my team as well. We know the big guys from last year are expensive for a reason, but they've really cost you a lot. They'll set you back. The prices top line this season. So my first team, I've gone for a few in that low 500K and even into the 400s that I think are definitely going to add early value to their price tag and score above what they're priced up in terms of average. So that's sort of the core-ish to my team at the moment. A few other guys, I'm big on Errol Goulden, the Hayden Young types, Nick Dacos. I think all those guys can score a fair way above what they're priced at, and that's where I'm starting at in 2023.
Yeah, we'll see. The Fandoms team will be online later in the week, I think. But Dan, jumping over to you, who is the first player you threw in your side?
We'll go with a bit of a draft rookie sort of perspective here for this. We'll go with Will Ashcroft as a first pick. I mean, when he scored 3 tons in the VFL, three tons in his 3 VFL games last year, I think that sort of cemented him as a player to watch in 2023 KFC SuperCoach. He's probably not going to have the role that Nick Dacos had across half-back, which is obviously very lucrative, especially for rookies getting cheapies down there. But I think he's probably going to play a half-forward role and midfield role at the Lions this year, even though that they have brought in Josh Dunkley to add to their midfield arsenal. You'd think that Ashcroft is going to be playing 22 games and should be worth the cash. I mean, some labelled Jason Horne-Francis the best player ever to have come out of anywhere, let alone South Australia. I'm looking at the guy at the top right corner of the and it didn't quite live up to the hype, but I think Will Ashcroft can this year and average that between that 80 and 90 points. It's not to say that Horne-Francis can't come back this year, but I think some supercoaches will be skeptical picking another 200K rookie again after JHF, but I think that Will Ashcroft be worth every penny.
Yeah, I agree.
Is there room for him in the Lions midfield? That's the only question I have, just because normally these top end draftees come into a bottom end team, and there's plenty of room for them to come in and get lots of game time. But the Lions are a pretty good team, and their midfield, especially as you say, adding Dunkley as well, is pretty stacked. So yeah, we'll get enough minutes in there to score enough to justify that price.
I think it's a good question because I think that he is quite similar to a Sam Walsh sort of player, where he can play on the wing and sort of with stints on ball in his first season. And just looking at his under 18 numbers, he was scoring over 120 most games, if not even reaching 170 points. And then the fact that he was able to do that against a VFL opposition in his few games for the Brisbane Lions VFL side, I think that shows that he can stack it up with another year under his belt. He's ultra professional, does everything right. So I think that it may not be scoring tons right from the get-go, but yeah, I think that he will. It'll be a matter of when, not if, he breaks into that midfield this year. And yeah, I think it should make at least probably 150K on his starting price.
Yeah, excellent. Well, mine it will be time for a little bit of Tigers chat because
Oh, here we go.
I haven't had a lot of joy the last few years picking Richmond players in KFC SuperCoach. Just the scoring across the board has been a bit more even, apart from Dusty when he had some absolute super scores, and Jaden Short there for a little while before he got moved into forward pocket. But this year, I think I can safely pick a couple of Tigers in recruits, Jacob Hopper and Tim Taranto. I mean, Taranto in the forward line. I think if I had to pick him as a pure mid, it might be a tougher choice, but I think picking him as a forward is pretty safe bet. He averaged around just under 100, I think, last year, and I can't see him going backwards from that. Should get more midfield time at Richmond than he did at a pretty stacked midfield at the Giants, even though his disposal sometimes can be a little bit iffy. If he's just getting clearances and banging it in there to Tom Lynch and Jack Riewoldt, hopefully he'll score pretty well. And Hopper, I think, is just an absolute must-have. 332K. He had a really down year last year. Only played, I think, 7 games and averaged about 60 KFC SuperCoach points, but I would just completely write that off. The year before, he averaged 97, and I think he can certainly score around that again, potentially go even higher because obviously Richmond recruited these guys for a clear need. And, during the year, we like to look at centre bounce attendances as an indication of, how many opportunities players are getting to get their hands on the ball and win clearances and hard ball gets and things like that we know get KFC SuperCoach points. And I think Hopper's going to have, just about 100% CBAs at Richmond. He'll probably Prestia when he's fit is maybe still the number one, but then he'll be straight in behind him. So just trying to bullet the ball out of the middle every time there for Richmond. So as a Tigers fan, I'm pretty happy to whack those guys straight in my team. And I think, Hopper in the midfield, similar to what Dan said, if we can, get 150K out of him and trade him out at Richmond's buy, that's a big win. But he might even be a season keeper if all goes well for him and Richmond and the Blair Hartley and the Richmond recruiters. I'll put my trust in them. So it'd be good to have those guys in my KFC SuperCoach team. We've got a few questions here which pertain to some of the other big questions that people are asking early in the preseason. And Phantom, this one is someone that I have put in my team early because I sort of think, it's only January. Let's not stress too much about injury risk and things like that. But when it gets close to round one, you are going to have to be a bit tougher in terms of whether we can afford to take risks on someone like Nat 5. He's only 313K, which is like insane, really, for someone who can score as well as 5 can. But the injury risk too high, or even the fact that he just might play more permanently in the forward line.
Yeah, he's an interesting one. Great price, as you mentioned. I don't think at 313K, even if he plays 22 games, 70% as a forward, I still think Nat 5 can average 90. We know how well he can win the ball in a contest. He can take a nice mark over it. Yes, maybe he's going to work on his kicking for goal, but I think he can do enough in that forward second mid maybe rotation to justify that price tag anyway. 313K, you can pick him as a stepping stone, really on the top end of what you want a stepping stone to be. But everyone's sort of worrying about at the forward role. Yes, he's not going to average 120 playing that role like he once did. But I still think at 313K, he can justify the price tag as a pure forward in the Dockers lineup. The concern is the injury history, though. So he could be flying over summer and go into round one, score a couple of tons to start off the year, kick a couple of goals, but then could go down in round 3 or something could happen. So there's always that there. And I think super coaches are considering maybe Elliot Yeo from the Eagles, who's reportedly up and going as well over there in the West, probably playing a little bit more in defence as well as the Eagles try to plug a few youngsters in the midfield. He's cheap as well, same injury history, same thing. He could score well down back there. Can you take both of them? Probably not. I've got Yeo in my team at the moment and not 5, but I think you can probably take the risk on one of them to start and don't be too concerned about the forward role, I don't think.
I've got both at the moment, so we'll see if I can stick to my guns on that one. Part 2 of this question, Dan, might throw to you. Darcy Cameron, I know, was a very successful pick for a lot of players, including you last year. And he looks like a pretty good option in the ruck where it's very hard to know what to do, when, especially when Brodie Grundy and Max Gawn now both in the same team. So who knows if they'll lead into each other's scores or what will happen there. So what are your quick thoughts on the ruck? And then, is Darcy Cameron someone we should be picking from the Pies? And would you put him in the ruck or in the forward line, given he's a ruck forward dual position?
it's something I've grappled with since SuperCoach has opened and even the team picker opened. Whether I do pick Darcy Cameron as a forward or in the ruck. I've got him in the ruck at the moment, but I mean that injury to Max Gawn, it seems like it's relatively minor. But if it means that Grundy's going to get an extra 10% CBAs than Gawn, then I think it's worth popping him in. I just don't have the cash at the moment to get Grundy in. But yeah, I think there's definitely Cameron's definitely a good pick, whether that is in the ruck or up forward. The problem is that there's so many good buys in the forward line around that 400k mark. Obviously even 5 at 300k. But I've got Dunkley, Rosie, and Taranto at the moment from F1 to 3, and I don't really want to take out any of those guys. I mean, Rosie averaged 110 in the second half of last year. Taranto is absolutely firing, as you said, Al, and then Dunkley, who knows what he can do with more midfield minutes at the Lions. So. Yeah, it may be a choice of going with a choice between Fife and Cameron for me, and then slotting Grundy in. But yeah, I think Cameron in forward line is could be the way to go potentially, considering there's a cheap ruck forward in Nick Madden who probably won't play at all next year, but he can just purely be used as a DPP swing with Cameron in case with Grundy got injured last year, obviously, and Rowan Marshall has had his injury troubles in the past, so he could be used as a backup if Rowan Marshall was out for 1 or 2 weeks, say, and it saves you a trade.
What are you thinking about the Rucks, Phantom? Craig here likes Darcy Cameron and Lloyd Meek, who's come over to Hawthorn, who's another potential bargain there. But which way are you leaning?
Yeah, I don't mind Lloyd Meek if he can become the number one man. A lot of competition there. We've got to wait and see how that plays out. For me, it's just to wait and see everywhere. We've spoken about this today and previously over in the West with Darcy and Luke Jackson. Wait and see how that plays out. Obviously, the Gawn and Grundy thing, how that plays out. Rowan Marshall, obviously, with Jack Hayes, Max King injured. Does he have to play a little bit more forward? Which we know he's a good forward, and we know that's why he was used there in the past. So hopefully not, but if he's a clear number one man, I've got him and Darcy Cameron there at the moment, but I don't mind the thought of having Darcy Cameron in the forward line too, if it doesn't work out with who go in the ruck. But I do agree with Dan. I've also got that stacked first half of the forward line, just can't fit him in at the moment. So Marshall and Cameron for me at the moment, but I can't say I'm at all close to being locked in there, apart from Rowan Marshall, if he's a number one man. What are you thinking?
Yeah, I mean, I love Marshall as well as a KFC SuperCoach player, but yeah, it's just that nagging thought that will they use him more in the forward line? And they've got Tom Campbell floating around as a potential sort of backup or second ruckman that they can play. So trying to remember back to Ross's days, at the Dockers and back at the Saints, is he a 2-ruck sort of guy, or does he prefer to just roll with the 1 ruckman? Because if Marshall just gets that number 1 spot on his own, I think he could score really, really well. I've got Tim English in there at the moment with Darcy Cameron at R2, really just based on how well he scored last year and the fact that Steph Martin's retired. They've got Lob over there from the Dockers, and I think he doesn't really love playing in the ruck. He'll definitely take some sort of boundary throw-ins in the forward line, but I think that'll mean more sort of just pure ruck time for Tim English, and running around the ground as that sort of link-up player. We know how he can rake up some pretty good numbers. So just have to hope he stays fit. He had a few concussions last year, and when he got hit, sort of Braden Preuss trying to take him out a couple of times. They were pretty cautious with him because he's had a bit of a history of concussions. So you wouldn't want him to get hit again and then miss a few weeks. And obviously, for his point of view, we definitely don't want that. But that's something that is in the back of my mind as well. So yeah, lots to play out there, and it's going to be a tricky preseason because there's only one official round of the JLT series or whatever it's called nowadays to really get a beat on exactly what teams are going to do. So there'll be some unofficial practice scratch matches and intra clubs and things that will be over to try and get an idea of exactly how teams are going to line up when it does go into round 1. A couple of more questions before we go. There's a good one here early from Michael asking about these guys. Basically, similar price range in defence. So defence is really tricky this year where you've got, I think, 5 or 6 players priced over 600,000, which is normally sort of midfielder type money. Your Tom Stewarts, Jordan Dawson, Doherty, Sicily, Jack Sinclair obviously was amazing last year. Like, we don't normally pay that much for guys in defence, so. But I think you probably want to start maybe at least one or two of them. But then there's a nice little bracket just behind them, around the 500k mark, where you've got Nick Dacos. Second year players. It's pretty tough to jump up from an incredible, I think 91 average in his first season, but then to go over 100 in year two. But it has happened a couple of times. The likes of Bontempelli and Clayton Oliver have done it. So is Dacos that good? I'm guessing he could be. Hayden Young, I know, is a phantom favourite. I think this Angus Brayshaw he must be referring to there, who I think we can pick in defence, but finished the year in the midfield for the Demons and scored really well. And then Mason Redman, I find it hard to get a beat on him because he had a tear last year from round sort of 5 to 15 or so, where he averaged about 115. He was unbelievable. But outside of that, he really didn't score that well. So a bit hard to know exactly what he's going to do this year. And again, they've got a new coach at the Bombers. So, out of those, Dacos is in my team at the moment. But Phantom, if you're sticking with Hayden Young, another one of your boys?
Yeah, I've got Dacos and Young out of those four. I like them all, but I agree with your concern a little bit on Redmond. I think that probably just puts him below those two. Angus Brayshaw, 550k, a little bit more expensive. Great numbers in the midfield. Is there a chance he floats back again a little bit, or his scoring wasn't as good? Can't probably be 100% sure on that. That probably puts him just behind Dacos and Young for me. Hayden Young obviously got Luke Ryan, who got back into some serious form in the back half of last year, and he won a lot of the ball in the Dockers defence, which we know he can do. So they play a good system there, the Dockers, and as much as I'd like to think or would want Hayden Young to be the man to carry the footy out of the fence every time, or when the Dockers can get the ball in his hands, it might not always happen. So I've got him in the moment, but there is some concern. That's probably why, to answer Michael's question, I've got Dacos at 1 if you had to choose.
How would you rank those for, Dan? You were on Dacos early last year.
Yeah. Someone was talking. It wasn't hot on him early, and now he's ranking him number 1. Very interesting. I think nail on the head there, and you as well with Redmond. He could have some really good upside considering his what he did last year. But I think there's certainly some risk there that he goes back to his regulation role of being more of a lockdown defender. Brayshaw as well. Like, is he the third mid? Is he the fourth mid? Is he the fifth mid? It's hard to say what happens behind Clayton Oliver. And Petrarca's even talked that Keziah Pickett might have some stints in the midfield. Does that impact Brayshaw's time? We know he's versatile, can play on the outside as well. So that'll be an interesting watch. Hayden Young is definitely one that could rise this year. But yeah, Luke Ryan's form was spectacular in that second half of the season. I think if Young gets kick-ins, gets a lock on the kick-ins, then he becomes a much more attractive option. But I'm not sure that happens. We'll sort of see in those practice games because Ryan's pretty much had a lottery on the kick-ins last year.
And you're picking Dacos?
Yes, sorry, I should have said that from the start. Yeah, I think he's been in and out a little bit. I do love the idea of picking the 600k guys, but it just doesn't offer you as much flexibility elsewhere. It's hard to choose, two of the three. At the moment, I have Sicily and Stewart, and then probably Dacos at D3. Even if he does, the one question would be how much midfield does he play, and does that impact his scoring? Similar to Jack Crisp going from defence to midfield and his average dropping. But yeah, I think Dacos looks like a pretty solid option still at this stage, especially at that price.
Yeah, I caught up with Heath Shaw yesterday, who's the KFC SuperCoach ambassador again this year, filming this year's TV ad, which we'll see in a couple of weeks. It's pretty funny scenes. They were, it was a bit confusing to watch, but I think when it all comes together, it'll be good. So I'm looking forward to seeing the finished product. But some pretty outrageous costumes and things that were going on. But talking some actual footy with Heath, and he loves the fact that Collingwood recruited Tom Mitchell, who is another potential underpriced option for us in the midfield. But he just said his role will purely be just the shovel in there, just to get the ball out to someone like Nick Dacos running past, who then we know what a good user of the footy is. and he can then hit their forwards on the chest. So I think he's pretty keen to pick both of those guys in his team this year. Now, just wrapping things up, we've got a question here, Phantom, for you from Matthew Murphy, one of our long-time viewers. So we'll give him a shout out here. And he's asking on Ben Cunnington and Toby McLean. So you've mentioned the forward line, and that is really one of the most interesting lines this year. I think in past years, it's sort of been hard to find guys at the top end that we really wanted. So it was easy in a way to take a chance on, some 200, 300K players and see how they go, which actually has worked out pretty well the last couple of years, Will Brodie and co. But this year, there's a lot more in that sort of 500K plus bracket that you could really see a really good reason to pick them. But then there's some cheap guys under that as well that you also want to try and fit in there. So I think Ben Cunnington's around the 400K mark, so that's a bit of a tricky price. But Toby McLean, 178K at the Dogs. You think if he's playing, he's just about a must-have.
Yep, I think so. On Cunnington, 419K probably just prices him just out of the conversation with so many other options around. I think he can still, if he comes back, all goes well, he can probably definitely outdo that price tag as well and add some value. But in terms of squeezing him, it's going to be hard, I think, for round one. Toby McLean, it all comes down to whether he's actually in Bevo's side for round one. And if he is, I think we sort of all have to pick him. He averaged 94 points per game a couple of years back before some injury. So I think at that price, Josh Dunkley's not there in the midfield. Even if he floats through there every now and then, plays across half forward and bobs up, I think he'll do more than enough to justify that price tag. And I've got him in at F6 at the moment. I won't tell you my F5 until my team review, I think maybe on Thursday. But I think we all have to have him if he's playing round one.
Yeah, I agree with that. And just to wrap things up, Dan, what do you think about Bevo? I think he's set to give us some more headaches this year with what he does with his magnets. But there's a few really cheap dogs if they get spots in the team. They've got Liam Jones, who hasn't played for a few years, but he's back. Missed last year anyway. But he's back and potentially playing as a permanent defender for sort of around 200K. And then Josh Bruce is only 161. And the whispers are he's training with a defender. So maybe there's a nice role there for him at a very cheap price.
Yeah, but I mean, they do have a 228 centimeter defender that's still growing in Sam Darcy, who actually a bit of a Dan Bagala moment. I was having a bit of brunch on Sunday, and I saw him walk past, and I knew it was him because he had to walk, significantly duck under two doorways. So I think he's still growing. He might be 214 by my calculations, but no, I think. In terms of those guys, I think obviously McLean, great option, but Bruce, is he going to be best 22 consistently and score well enough in an intercept role? I'm not quite sure. I mean, you never say never with interceptors with Liam Jones at 228K, but Paddy McCartan was a great pick last year at 160. But yeah, I still feel that if a guy like Jack Bowes is playing, who's averaged 90 a couple of seasons ago, who's 270K, I think he's probably a better option, or even a Connor McKenna if he's off halfback, 160K, or even Ruben Gimby if he's getting to midfield time or off halfback for the Eagles. Yeah.
No, I think Connor McKenna is one that's worth mentioning as one of the first picked for a lot of us. I think, assuming he gets into that Brisbane team, 167K, there's sort of a role there for him, you think, running off halfback, which we know you can score pretty well doing that. So he'd be a pretty easy one to lock in. So thanks, everybody, for jumping on. We'll be keeping a very close eye on, we've talked quite a bit there about, who might have a new role, who's moved to a new team, who maybe is under an injury cloud. So lots to be paying attention to as, teams return to start ramping up their preseason training, start playing some match sims and intra-clubs. And then when we do get that one round of practice matches, we'll be all over that. But stay tuned. Plenty more content coming your way. The Phantoms team, as we said in a couple of days, I think Dan, we're going to put Dan's team online too. So it'll all be there for everyone to take a look at.
You sure?
Might just go on social. We'll see. Thank you, guys, for joining us. Thanks, everybody, for watching. We'll be back again soon with some great KFC SuperCoach chat.
See you all.
Thanks, guys.